This epilogue is one of my favorite epilogues that I've read in a horror book in a long time. Hello, hi, my name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be doing a very exciting reading vlog because I'm going to be reading some horror books in the dark. You might be wondering why my girl Phoenix is sitting right here next to me. My sweet baby girl, my German Shepherd, Phoenix. Phoenix also just turned 8 recently, and she is joining me for today's video because today's video is actually sponsored by Farmer's Dog. And I'm so excited to be working with Farmer's Dog because I've actually been a customer of Farmer's Dog for so many years now. I first heard about Farmer's Dog a few years ago when my sister started ordering their products, and I think it really makes sense when you think about it to be feeding your dog fresh, minimally processed food over the highly processed kibble. The sign-up process is also very easy. You take a dog personalization quiz. I was also really impressed with the first unboxing of this product because not only do you get plenty of food for your dog, but they also provide you with this amazing free tote and freezer bag and a reusable storage container so that you can store some of their food in the fridge. And something a lot of people might not know is that if you are transitioning a dog from eating only kibble to fresh food, it's really important to follow the transition guide that they provide in your first box so that you introduce the food at a slow rate so that you don't upset your dog's stomach. I feel like my dog Phoenix, she can be a very picky eater actually. I know most dogs will just like eat up the scraps of like anything, but she's actually kind of a picky eater, so we weren't sure how she was going to respond to the food, but she has been eating so well with Farmer's Dog. Like, she loves it so much. She gets really excited. The tail's wagging. I feel like it makes mealtime for Phoenix so much easier because these bags are just ready to go. You store them in the freezer, but then you can put them in the fridge like a day before you're going to give it to her so it has time to defrost. I love that Farmer's Dog makes it so simple with flexible orders. I feel like this is especially great if you're a new dog parent or if you're traveling a lot. It just gives you that peace of mind to know that that food is going to be delivered right to your door and you don't have to worry about it. And it definitely does give me that peace of mind to know that my baby girl is getting fresh and well-balanced meals. And the Farmer's Dog is more than just healthy dog food. They're a company that's on a mission to help dogs live longer and healthier lives and to help dog owners have a peace of mind that they're doing right by their dogs. Get 50% off your first box of freshly made healthy dog food by using my link down below. Plus, you get free shipping and 24/7 customer support. You can click the link down in the description or you can scan the QR code on the screen. And thank you so much to Farmer's Dog for sponsoring today's video. So if you missed it, last October I actually made a video just like this one where I read some horror books in the dark, and it's one of my favorite videos I've ever made on my channel, and that's what really inspired me to want to do this again. And now that it's October and it's spooky season, it just felt right. So in this vlog, I'll be reading 3 new horror books in the dark. I do love reading in the dark, and I feel like it adds that extra level of like creepiness sometimes for these books. One of them is going to be 13 Months Haunted by Jimmy Giuliano. This one is actually my BookTube book club pick for the month of October, but I thought this one would be a perfect one to read in the dark because this one just sounds like it's going to be really spooky, and it also sounds like it's going to have a lot of really great early 2000s nostalgia, and I've just been loving that in horror lately. Like, I love the stuff that's taking place in like the late 90s, the early 2000s. I'm also planning to read Play Nice by Rachel Harrison because even though I don't expect this book to be too scary based off of my past experiences with Rachel Harrison, I feel like this one has the potential to be the most scary because this one actually takes place at a haunted house, and because this one actually does involve a haunted house, I thought maybe this would be a fun one to include in this video. And then I'm also going to be reading this new book called 8114. Okay, I haven't really seen anybody talking about this book, so like I don't even really remember what this one is about, but when I saw this cover, I was like, are you kidding me? That is so scary, with like the red eyes in the background and the weird long legs, like the way the legs kind of turned in weird. I don't like it. It really freaks me out. And so I downloaded this one onto my Kindle, and I thought this would be a really fun one to read in the dark. So for now, let's shut off the lights and get reading. I decided to turn on some lights in my room just so that you can see me, so that I can update you about 13 Months Haunted, because I started reading this and I just hit part 3 of the book already. I'm now 170 pages in. According to the audiobook, I'm about 45% of the way through, so I thought now would be a good time to update you, because this book has been so fascinating so far. So something that I'm liking about this story is that it's taking place in October in the year 2000. It's taking place in a small town called Clover Creek, and in the story we're following this character named Piper, who is a librarian at the school. Ever since this character got introduced, I can't help but picture that main character from the movie Weapons that was like also a teacher. I don't know why she was like the first thing that came to mind, and it feels very fitting for her character to be picturing her like that. The main premise of this book is that we're following Piper's perspective as she's starting to notice that like something weird is happening at this school, and it kind of has to do with this young girl named Avery who is at the school. A lot of the kids at the school just think that she's really weird because they think that her house is haunted, and a lot of kids are spreading rumors at the school and saying that her dad and her sister were killed by whatever was in that house. There's also a lot of like speculation about Avery's mother, because Avery's mother is actually her classroom learning aide, so she's like going to school with her every day, and a lot of the kids in the school are saying that her mom's a witch, and there's just like all this speculation around this young girl that's very weird. You know, in this story we do get a lot of like mixed media elements, so like in between the chapters that are from Piper's perspective, we also do get the diary entries from this young girl named Avery, and then we do get this like online diary that this girl Piper is writing about the student Avery. And there have been so many, you know, like late 90s and like early 2000s references already. I started writing them down because I was like, wow. I mean, we have Napster, AOL, IM, Barbie.com, VCR, Yahoo Games, the World Wide Web, Britney Spears, TLC, Backstreet Boys, Blair Witch. So this book is chock full of the pop culture and like the 90s references for sure. I really feel like this book is capturing what that era of time was like when people were just like discovering the internet for the first time, and like when the internet was like such a new thing. So I am really loving the overall vibe of this book so far. There was something in this book that happened at the very end of part 1 that I was like, whoa, like okay, like shit's ramping up, you know, like the story was starting to really grip me by that point and get really interesting. I also did start writing down like my theories and my predictions for like what I think is going on, at least in terms of like what the horror is in this book, because I'm loving how a lot of the horror elements of this kind of seem like they're related to like technology in a way. I don't know, I feel like this book is very unique, you know, because this is actually from the same author as Dead 11, and I was such a big fan of Dead 11, and that's why I ended up picking this one to be my book club pick, because I really did enjoy Dead 11, and I feel like there's something about the way that this author writes horror. It just really works for me. It's just so readable, so easy to get into, and I just feel instantly drawn to the characters. But I do have like my own theories and my own predictions, and if I'm right about everything, I do think that's going to be a little bit annoying. I think something that I'm not liking so far is that our main character, Piper, like she just seems a little bit naive at times, because there have been 2 instances where I'm like, well, obviously that's what's happened, and Piper just like thinks in a completely different way, and it's almost like annoying. I'm like, Piper, like connect the dots. Like, what are we doing? And I don't know if that's like intentional because the author's trying to like surprise us and pull a gotcha, but I'm like, no, like I'm predicting these things pretty early on. So I am gonna be annoyed if Piper's just kind of being naive and like not seeing the signs that are like right in front of her face. But I am really liking the use of like the mixed media in this book, because sometimes I don't always think it's like relevant, or like I do tend to get annoyed when mixed media doesn't really feel like it has a purpose in the story. But in this case, I actually really do like the mixed media. I'm loving the diary entries, especially from this young girl Avery. I feel like her diary entries are some of the strongest parts of the book for me so far, because they're so creepy and they're so weird, and it seems like she can like see things that aren't there, or it seems like something is like haunting her specifically. And I do like reading about the blog that this woman is writing about the student, and I like how people are trying to theorize on her blog by like leaving comments about like what they think is happening. I think that aspect of the story is really fun, and I do love the setting with this book. Like I love that it's taking place in like the late 90s, early 2000s. It definitely feels like it does. You know, I feel like a lot of times I'll be reading these horror books lately that are supposed to be taking place in this time period, but they don't really feel like they're taking place in that time period. But this book definitely does. And I feel like this is something that this author does really well, you know, because I thought the same thing about Dead 11, because that book is about this town that feels like they're almost like stuck in the year of 1994. And so that one also had, you know, really great like like 90s vibes and references and stuff, so I really appreciate that about this as well. But anyway, I'm almost halfway through the book. I think I'm going to save the second half of this for tomorrow night. Today it is raining so loud outside of my window. I don't know if you can hear it. And later tonight we're supposed to be getting thunderstorms. So it is like the perfect cozy vibe right now. And I ended up finishing 13 Months Haunted. And like, oh my gosh, this book just sent me on a roller coaster, dude, because there were parts where I was like, you know, I'm not really feeling this right now. Or I was kind of feeling nervous because it was starting to introduce a trope in horror that I don't usually love, and it was kind of starting to like lean in that direction, and I was like, oh no. But then at the same time, there were so many parts in the second half of this book that reminded me of a few of my different favorite horror movies, and because of that, I was really loving it. I also feel like this book really surprised me in a lot of ways, because even though it did remind me of like some of my favorite horror movies, I do think the concept in this one was pretty unique. Like, I don't think I've read anything quite like this one. And I feel like that's something about this author that I really admire, actually, because I think that's something that's really difficult to do, is to be so creative and like so original with the kind of horror, because I feel like we're kind of living in a time where it feels like everything's been done before, but at least for me, like, this feels like something new and different. I definitely agree with people that are saying this kind of feels a little bit like campy and like silly at times, or like it's not supposed to be like scary, but I feel like this book, for me, it was like the perfect balance of like really actually like some really creepy moments and some creepy scenes that had me like, ugh, like that's so weird. But then it was also a good balance of kind of like the cheesiness, like the campiness. Like, it definitely did have a few scenes that felt very campy and like it wasn't meant to be taken as seriously. But I feel like this author balanced it really well. Like, I don't know, I think the writing in this book, it reminded me a little bit of like David Sodergren or even like Chuck Wendig. Like, it kind of reminded me of those authors for some reason. I had such a roller coaster experience with this book though, because in the beginning, I thought the story was like really interesting almost right away. And then I kind of got bored with it a little bit at the start of the second half, and right before we hit part 5, I was thinking to myself like, oh my god, I'm probably gonna end up rating this around like 3 stars, like this is just kind of mid for me. Then after part 5 happened, the plot just kept getting more and more interesting to me. And even though I do have a few little like nitpicky things about the end, like I don't think the ending was like a perfect ending for me, but I will say this epilogue is one of my favorite epilogues that I've read in a horror book in a long time. Like, I really loved the epilogue. I was gonna be like screaming and like kicking my feet because I just thought it was so fun, and it was just so interesting and like creepy and eerie. And like I said, this book does have a really good balance of scenes that I think are kind of like eerie and weird. Balances it with these scenes that do kind of feel like campy silly, but like the campy and the silly doesn't bother me when the book still has a lot of scenes that I think are genuinely kind of creepy. I also think as far as my like predictions went in this book, because I did talk about how I jotted down some predictions for what I thought was going to be happening, and like I was kind of right, or at least like I was heading in the right direction. Like, my theory wasn't fully fleshed out for like what actually ended up happening, so like there were still things that I was pretty surprised about in this one, but like the general gist of like what I thought was happening was correct. But I'm also not mad about it because I think it's actually really unique and really fun. I love on the back how one of the blurbs says that this is ideal for fans of Stephen King and Stranger Things. Like, I can definitely see the comparison to Stranger Things, especially. I think it's something about like the nostalgia and like the time period especially. God, I don't know how I want to rate this book because this really took me off guard. Like, I think I ended up liking this a lot more than I originally thought I was going to. I think something though with this author that I will critique him for is that sometimes his books just feel a little bit too long. There was just a part in the middle where I was like, okay, like I'm ready for things to wrap up now, and I don't think this book needed to be like 360 pages. And I remember feeling the same exact way about his other book, Dead 11. Like, I thought the same, where I was like, this is really great, but I don't think this book needs to be this long, but otherwise, like, I really like the way that this author writes horror books. And I do think there was an element of like reading this book in the dark that made it like extra creepy to me. Like, I do think this would be a good one to read in the dark. I also think this would be a good one to read on Halloween because there's a lot of talk in this book about Halloween, and Halloween specifically is like connected to the story in a really fun way. So I think this is like the perfect book to be reading in October. So I'm really glad that this one's my October book troop pick. As far as my rating goes, I don't really know. I feel like I have to give this book 4 stars just because I'm speaking so highly of it and I really enjoyed myself for the most part. But the thing is that I don't know if I liked this one quite as much as I enjoyed Dead 11 from this author, but I also gave that book 4 stars. So maybe if I'm being like really particular and picky, this one's more like a 3.75 maybe. But I think giving this book 4 stars does feel right. Like, this does feel like something I really enjoyed for the most part. And I'm really excited too because we finally figured out that the live show for this book is going to be happening very soon. We're going to be discussing this one on October 30th on a Thursday at 4 o'clock Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. I will have the link down in the description if you want to save it so you can come and chat with us about this one. I know this book is getting a lot of mixed reviews online, so I'm really curious to see how my co-hosts end up feeling about it. But either way, I think this is going to be a really fun book to discuss. Hi, hello. It's about 9 o'clock in the evening right now, but earlier today I got the chance to start on Play Nice by Rachel Harrison. And I know I technically have not been, reading this book in the dark, so like it doesn't really fit into the video concept right now. But earlier today I got about 178 pages into this book and I'm really enjoying this so far. So I thought maybe for the rest of the night I could spend the rest of the night finishing this book in the dark because I do feel like I'm starting to get to the like really creepy parts of this book anyway. Rachel Harrison has been a bit of a hit or miss author for me in the past. I don't know why I am so drawn to her books, and it seems like it's kind of become a tradition for me every single October to read her new release. I was able to get the audiobook from my library and I'm 56% of the way through this one on audio, and it is going so well so far. In this story, we're following this character named Cleo, and she is a stylist as well as an influencer. And Cleo as a character is very interesting because she grew up in a haunted house. But right at the start of this book, her mother passes away and leaves behind her and her 2 sisters the haunted house. Her sisters kind of want nothing to do with it and they're like, we don't want to go back there. And so Cleo kind of sees this as an opportunity because she wants to go and like renovate the house and like make content out of it. And so she decides that she's gonna go back to this haunted house. And what's really fun is that her mom had actually written a book about this haunted house, and it's really cool because in between the chapters of this book we get to read her mom's story that was about this place. The setup of this book is so reminding me of like Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. It just has a very similar plot where like the main character's parent passes away and they're coming back to the haunted house and they're reading about the book that their parents wrote about the haunted house. Like, it's very similar in premise, which I'm very happy about because Home Before Dark is like one of my favorite Riley Sager books. So I'm having a lot of fun with this concept so far, and I actually really do like Cleo as a character. Like, I think she's so funny and so interesting, and I'm really vibing with the writing in this one overall. I just think it's so well written compared to some of Rachel Harrison's other stuff. I also do love the sister relationship in this book so far, and there's even been a little bit of subtle hints of like a romance happening between Cleo and this other character, and I'm also really invested in the romance actually. Like, it's written so well, it's so cute. So I thought this would be a good one to finish up with reading in the dark tonight because there have been a lot of really creepy moments with this character Cleo, like being alone in this house and not only like thinking that she's hearing things, but then also just like some strange things that keep happening to her that she can't explain. I'm definitely invested in like the haunted elements of the story, and I think it's really well done so far. I'm going to shut off all the lights in here and then use my little book light. It's a little bit later. It's now just after 11 o'clock at night, but I just finished reading Play Nice, and I'm so happy to let you know that I actually really liked this one a lot. I'm gonna have to look through all of Rachel Harrison's books that I've read, but I feel like I can confidently say that this one is my favorite that I've read from her so far, which is amazing, and I think it's saying a lot because I feel like I had to have read at least 5 books from this author now, if not more. So to find a new favorite from her feels incredible. I think part of the reason too why I enjoyed this one as much as I did is because I recently, last month, I made an entire video dedicated to like reading haunted house horror books, and it didn't go very well. Like none of the books ended up being enjoyable for me. And so this feels very refreshing to actually read a haunted house horror book that I do like, because I usually do enjoy haunted house horror. And so I can't believe how much that video freaking sucked that I did before. I feel like the reason why this book worked so well for me is because I think the writing in this was just so good. It was just so easy to get into, and I really felt connected to all of these characters, especially Cleo and her really complicated relationship, not only with her sisters, but especially with her mother. And I think because her mother has recently passed away, it's like she's taking the time to really try and understand her mother in a way that she didn't before. I forgot to mention when I was talking about this earlier, by the way, that there is a quote at the start of this book from Doja Cat. It's literally from her song Attention, which is like one of my favorite Doja Cat songs, by the way. But it says, "It needs, it seeks affection, hungry, it fiends, look at me, you lookin'." Like, isn't that so funny? Like, Rachel Harrison is iconic for that, truly. But I am surprised by how much I enjoyed some of the like subtle romance that was happening in this book. Like, I literally put in a tab at one of the parts where I was like, oh my god, like they're so cute. So I was not expecting to like care about the romance in this book, but I did. I feel like this is also proving to me that like I can enjoy a romance in a horror book. It just has to be done right, you know? I think I'm probably gonna end up giving this book 4 stars, and like the only reason why I don't think it was quite like a 5-star for me is just because the ending, I guess, was a little bit like predictable. I think if this book had something that really like shocked me or really wowed me at the end, then I think there's definitely a higher chance that I would have given this one 5 stars, but I'm so happy that I had a new 4-star favorite from this author. I also love the fact that this book is called Play Nice, and I kind of like love the way that that comes into the story. It's just very creative, and I love when you have those like aha moments when you realize like why the book's titled that. I think it makes sense why this ended up being a book of the month pick, because book of the month so rarely will have horror books as selections, like almost never. But I think it makes sense why this one was a book of the month pick, because I do think this is a story where like you really connect with the characters, and it is a very character driven type of story, and it does feel very similar to like Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. Like that's definitely the #1 thing that I would think to compare this to. And that's incredible, you know, because Home Before Dark is one of my top favorite Riley Sager books. So I love that it feels kind of similar and like something I could recommend if you enjoyed that one. Okay, hello, I wanted to update you because it is now about 9 o'clock at night and I've been laying in bed reading 8114. Doesn't it look so cool in here? I finally changed the batteries on these lights that are like right behind my bed, and I feel like it looks so good. I turned on the light though so that I can update you and so you can actually like see my face. But yeah, I'm now 51% of the way through the book. I just hit chapter 12. And so far, this book is not going very well. I do have some mixed feelings about it, but for the most part, I'm just kind of like irritated while I'm reading this. Because in this story, we're following this guy named Paul, and basically like he started this podcast that was called Adam Benny is Missing. And it was basically about his friend from high school named Adam that went missing, and he made this podcast trying to figure out like what happened to his friend. And then his friend, Adam Benny, who like the podcast is about, actually reaches out to him and he's like, hey, me and my mom are both fine, but we're actually like on the run from my abusive father, so like can you stop with this podcast? It's actually putting us in danger. And then Paul is like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. And so then this is about how Paul decides that he's going to end the podcast that's about Adam, and he's getting like a lot of heat for this, and he's getting a lot of backlash because people are really mad that like he would make this podcast and like put his own friend in danger. And so now one of his other friends, Matt, calls him and he's like, hey, you need to come back home. And so now he's going back to his hometown where like he has hasn't been to his hometown in over 10 years, like ever since his mom passed away. And he comes back because something really awful has happened to one of his close friends in the town. And so what does this guy decide to do? He decides to make another podcast about it, which I don't know. I feel like this main character guy, like Paul, like he's kind of a piece of shit. Like I don't know why he keeps making these podcasts about his friends. I don't know what his problem is, but it's like he keeps airing out all their dirty laundry on his podcast. And the book is called 8114 because this is the address of the home that he used to live in when he grew up. And this house is definitely kind of strange. Like it's giving very like spooky, haunted vibes. Like something happened at this house. I mean, I do like some of the creepy atmosphere in this book. Like I do think there are some moments in this book with the creepiness that is just written so well. And like there are some moments with like, it's almost like the body horror. Like there are things happening on his body that are truly like, oh my god, disgusting. And so like some of the horror is really working for me, but then most of the time I feel like the horror itself is so cringy and like it just feels so cheesy instead of scary, which is like not the vibes that I'm wanting with this. But reading this at night and like in the dark is not making it any more scary for me. It really kind of feels like cheesy and stupid at times. In between the chapters of like reading about what's happening with Paul, we do get some like clips from the podcast that we read about in the book. And dude, when he had his friend Matt on the podcast, I was just like, what the fuck? Like this feels so unrealistic. Why would Matt not tell him all of these things sooner? Like why would Matt wait until he's on the podcast to like reveal all of these things to him? Like it just felt kind of like ridiculous. I don't know, and I feel like this main character Paul dude, he's driving me crazy. The amount of times that he thinks about his podcast and like mentions his podcast, and the amount of times that he's like, oh my god, I should ask this person to be on my podcast because that would bring in so many views. Like, is that insensitive? Like, yes, that's insensitive, Paul. He's just so, like, that obnoxious guy with a podcast who doesn't care about anybody but himself and wants to make some money on his podcast. Like, that's the vibe I'm getting from him, and he's so annoying. It's bringing the story down for me, even though I do think this book has some creepy moments and some good, like, body horror in some scenes. I just don't really love the writing in this book overall. I don't know how to explain what about the writing doesn't work, but, like, in some scenes, it just feels so, like, clunky and, like, disjointed, and I have to keep rereading the scene to like understand exactly what's going on. I don't think that there's an audiobook available for this book yet, or at least I'm not entirely sure. I don't think there's a way for me to access it, but I do wonder if they ever do come out with an audiobook for this one, how it would sound with the podcast. Like I would hope that they would do like full production and make it sound really cool with the podcast, because I do think that would be an interesting element. But like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not loving this. It doesn't feel like this book is doing a whole lot for me right now, but I am going to finish reading it because I'm already 50% of the way through, and like it only took me about like an hour and 20 minutes to read the first 50%, and I will update you with my final thoughts, but I don't think I'm gonna love this one. Hello, I have finished reading 8114, and I'm so sad to say that I really didn't like this one. I think I'm going to give this book a very generous 2 stars. And I say that it's a generous 2 stars because there's a very short list of things that I actually enjoyed about this book. Because the things that I enjoyed about this book include the cover. I love this cover. I think it's so creepy, so weird. The second thing I liked about this book is that I did like some of the horror scenes. I think this book was at its best when it was having some like really creepy moments with the body horror stuff. There would be like specific moments that dealt with this like idea of black mold, and that stuff really freaked me out, and I think that stuff was really well written and the most engaging thing about the book for me. And then I also really liked the author's note that was included at the very end of this book, where this author kind of talked about how this book and this place is kind of inspired by a house that exists in real life that's actually called 8114 or something. Like it's a place that actually exists that you can go to, and he even included a picture of the house at the end of the book, so I thought that was a kind of cool thing that he did. And I'm sure that this author's like a really nice guy, but like for me, I just really didn't like this book. I'm so sorry, because this main character was so annoying. Like, oh my god, god, the amount of times he was like, wait, I can put them on my podcast and it's gonna make me legendary. It's gonna make the podcast legendary. When like awful things were happening to his friends, I was like, god, he is just so heartless. And like maybe he was intentionally written to be that way, but like he was just so annoying to follow for this entire book. I also just think the writing in this book was not my favorite. Like at times it would be very hard for me to follow exactly what was going on. It was like this main character would have these like hallucinations, or I would question like if what was happening to him was actually really happening or if he was having some sort of hallucination. It was just very unclear to me at times when things were real and when things were just kind of happening to him in his head. I also just think the writing in general got to be a little bit repetitive for me, not only with how much this guy would talk about his podcast and trying to get everybody onto his podcast, but even the way that he would talk about his friends and like the town where he grew up. Like everything about it just started to feel very repetitive. And because this book is so short, you know, like it's only a little bit over 200 pages, like it is a really quick read, but it also was just kind of like exhausting to read. And if I wasn't reading this for this video, I probably would have DNF'd this book pretty early on. I do think a podcast element in a horror book can be done in a really fun way, but I just didn't really care for this one because the podcast just felt very unrealistic to me. I didn't like how it seemed like his friends were like withholding information from him until they got on the podcast just to do like a big reveal for like his entire audience. It just kind of felt cringy and like unrealistic. And there would be so many times where I would be like writing in the notes of my book like shut up to the main character because he would just like ramble on and on and on about his freaking podcast. I can definitely see though the inspiration for this book from a lot of other really popular things. Like I think there were parts of this book that reminded me of like a Stephen King book that I've read before, and there were parts of this book that reminded me of like The Haunting of Hill House. And like I can definitely see the inspiration, and I feel like I've read other books that have this kind of a concept. And that's also why I want to give this book 2 stars instead of just giving it the 1 star, because I feel like this author had some really cool ideas. I feel like all of the ideas were there for this book to be great. I just didn't love the execution of it personally, and because I didn't like any of the characters in this book, it kind of made me struggle to care about the story. I mean, that's not always the case with horror. Like I don't always need to like the characters, and sometimes I actually do prefer to read about characters that are unlikable, but I think it's because this specific character, Paul, was so annoying. And I think when a main character is unlikable because they're annoying, it kind of like kills it for me, you know? I don't want them to be annoying. I don't know, I have so many feelings about this one, and I'm so bummed that I'm ending this video on kind of like a negative note, because I do feel like the first 2 books ended up going very well for me, and I do feel really bad giving a lower rating to a book that has barely any reviews. Like I actually looked on Goodreads and this book only has like 400 reviews on Goodreads, and I think it's a self-published book, so like I do feel bad giving it a low rating, but I also just have to give my honest feedback and my honest opinion. So you'll have to let me know if you've read any of the 3 books that I read in this video. What are your thoughts on them? I love doing this video series where I read horror books in the dark. I feel like I should do this more often because I've only done it, you know, like last October was the first time that I did a video like this. I mean, I do often, you know, read horror books in the dark for like the readathons that I host with like Winterween and Summerween, but to actually do a whole video dedicated to reading horror books in the dark is a very fun thing for me, and I want to know how you feel about the video concept. Like, is this something you'd like to see from me again? Because I had a lot of fun filming this video over like the last couple of days. And let me know if there are any horror books specifically that you think would be really good to read in the dark, because I feel like the reason why I struggle with these kinds of videos is because I haven't read these horror books yet, so like I don't know if they're gonna be extra creepy to read in the dark until I read them. But if you've read any horror books recently that you're like, holy shit, this would have been so scary to read it in the dark, then definitely let me know in the comments, because I would love any and all recommendations that you have. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye!